Peter Parker has had it rough the past few months, moving away with his wife only to be brought back to New York. But with the return of his greatest foe, Norman Osborn, things have gotten even crazier. With the loss of his brother and daughter, Peter Parker and his wife Mary Jane must cope with their losses. Between their return to college, Norman Osborn, the Stacy family, new gangs, ninjas, and the Trapster, will they rise above it all or crack under the weight? Welcome to the Forgotten Era, where we'll answer all those questions and more. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to the Forgotten Era podcast. It's me, your host, Ethan, and today I am joined once again by Adam Chapman.
Thank you. Yes, I am Adam Chapman from the Comic Shenanigans podcast. Very excited to be here for back-to-back episodes.
Yes, I'm very excited to have you. Definitely helping me not have to do this alone, so I greatly appreciate it.
I would imagine it would be tough to do alone because, I mean, the nature of your show with doing recaps, I mean, if you're doing recaps to air, it's not going to be as interesting. And then being able to kind of ping pong when you're talking about legacy material is nice. So happy to fill the space.
Exactly, yeah. I have done a few solo episodes, and it just really isn't as fun. And it's also just very awkward. So you're definitely right about the bouncing back and forth. It's kind of necessary. I can only talk to myself so much without going crazy. So today we are back in the world of JMD Mateus's Spectacular Spider-Man with the follow-up to the monumental issue 250 with a interesting Kraven story. It's JMD, so you kind of have to get a Kraven in there somewhere, I guess. And we're following new Kraven, who Peter doesn't know is new Kraven yet. But it is Spectacular Spider-Man 251 through 254, 251 through 253 being the Kraven story, and then 254 is the prelude to Spider Hunt here, which is a very strange issue. But we'll get into it. Do you have any preamble you want to say about anything before we start, or?
So unlike with the other issues, like I remember these covers very vaguely. Like I feel like Spectacular wasn't as available where I was at the times. Like I remember the Peter Parker Spider-Man covers I remember very well. The Amazing was on the newsstand. I was buying it. I feel like I didn't see as much of Spectacular unless I really sought it out. So, I mean, I knew 250. I think we share an appreciation and love of 250. I'm a huge fan of Spider Hunt, but these issues in the middle, I didn't read them until much later. So it wouldn't have been when I was like, 15, 14, when I was reading these other issues. It would have definitely been a later period. It's interesting having read so much more comics by now, being able to isolate what I like about this and what I don't. And also having talked to JMD as many times as I've been lucky enough to do, it does make me approach work in a different way. I mean, it seems very reductive, but once you've talked to a creator and you understand more about their thought process, it does make you look at their writing differently. So I'm interested in talking about this with you because my perspective on JMD is very different now than it would have been 5-6 years ago before I'd ever spoken to him, if that makes any sense.
Well, that definitely makes sense. I've only met him one time, and I really didn't get to talk a whole lot, so it is cool to have that other perspective. I want to meet him again, but he doesn't really. I mean, he just started doing cons again. But for the longest time, he wasn't because of COVID. So
bring him on your podcast, though. I mean, he's right in the wheelhouse, right? Like he's done this run. If true. Anyone's well suited to talk to him, it's you.
Exactly. But I don't know how to contact him. So
I'm pretty sure his website has like a contact section.
I've tried
Imagination Workshops.
I tried his. I guess I was looking on his blog spot. I didn't try on the actual website. So. Because I tried to reach out to him before, and I had to do so through a comment section, which was very awkward. But yeah, I can definitely.
I mean, here's the thing, right? You gotta get in touch with these people in any way you can, and so like I take advantage of every opportunity to try and do that. And then you will get through to these people. I mean, JMD is super accessible. He's very nice. I will say he only records on Saturdays though. Typically doesn't do weekends. So every time I've recorded with him is usually around like noon on a Saturday. But he's pretty open and accessible. And the more you get into the world and start interviewing more of these people, more doors will unlock. Like the big one for me, and I think I mentioned this on the last episode I was on, was Mark Bagley was like my white whale for like a decade. I was just like, if I ever have Mark Bagley on, I'll just end the podcast. Now it's funny, I actually ended the podcast prior to having him on, and then came back after a year hiatus, and then finally it happened because I had talked to Glenn Green. I think it was Glenn Greenberg who helped make it happen. I can't remember now for sure, but I think he was like, well, "Here's his email. I've talked to him. He's receptive." I'm like, awesome. And then I just never heard anything back. And then finally, kind of out of the blue, he's like, "Call me today." I'm like, "Okay." So I just like called him, and he's like, "So you want to interview me for the podcast?" I'm like, "Yeah." Like I remember I was like at work. And like I'm working in a bank. I'm in a suit. I'm a financial planner. And then suddenly I'm talking to Mark Bagley on the phone. It was a very surreal experience. But I got like two-hour interviews out of it. So it
Oh,
was
that's awesome.
again, so he was my white whale, and it happened. So I mean, if you really, put in the work and pester lightly.
Yeah.
Obviously, you don't want to come on too strong, but be persistent, reach out, and eventually things will happen. And it's awesome. I didn't start doing interviews till about 2.5 years into my podcast. I look back and I'm like, I don't even know what I was doing. Finally, it was like I unlocked that gear that I really wanted to do, which was creator interviews. And I think there's so much fun. I always quote the first X-Men movie when Rogue asked Wolverine, like, if it hurts in terms of his claws coming out every time. And I get nervous every time I'm about to interview with someone, even though I've done like hundreds by now. Every time I get like butterflies in my stomach because I'm always like nervous that I'm going to talk to a creator. But you get through it and you do it, and it's awesome. So you're in the perfect spot to reach out to him and like Dezago, because you're talking about their work in particular and really elevating it and saying like, don't forget about this stuff. I think he would really get a kick out of that and appreciate that because it's he I mean, this has been the year of JMD in a lot of ways. A lot of his work is finally being collected. His Spectacular Spider-Man got an omnibus finally. His Doctor Fate over at DC finally got collected. So like a lot of his stuff is finally being on bookshelves. And so, but this stuff obviously has not made it there. So I think if you were to like, hey, I really love this period. No one really talks about it. Would you be willing to talk about this period on my podcast? I think he'd jump at the opportunity. Anyways, that's me trying to pump you up and make sure you do this because I think it's
All
a real
right.
opportunity for you.
I'll definitely be sure to give it a try. At least after things fell through with Danny Fingeroth, I was kind of like
Mm.
just just riding the nothing wave for a little bit because I was so close, and then he like
Mm.
ghosted me. So
Oh, that sucks.
yeah, we were like, I was like, give me a time, and then nothing. So, um, but that's okay. I can always try again. That wasn't for this, obviously. That was for Clone Saga stuff.
Hmm.
Um, so it's kind of it's hard because if I do talk to these people, I'll want to talk to them about both. But if I'm doing it on this show, I'm pretty much just gonna stick it to this stuff. Um, but I love the Clone
Or
Saga, so I can't
or
help
it's
it.
an episode that goes up for both. It could be
Yeah,
a multi-purpose episode, right? I mean, there's
exactly.
something to that, but yeah, I understand that idea, right? Like it's hard to like just keep yourself to one stuff when you're like, well, I could talk to you about any of this
Yeah,
and all of this. I found that's actually what was in some ways easier for me as a podcaster is that I kind of generally do kind of full overview of careers, and then when I have people come back, I'm really able to kind of zero in on weird stuff,
right.
or the stuff that really means a lot to me, and I find that has been really interesting. I think that at times it can be tougher for people who have a very specific mandate on their podcast because they have to really be into talking about that thing, otherwise it could be challenging.
Yeah,
The way that I got Mark Wade to do my show, I pitched like, "Hey, we should talk about Ruse from CrossGen Comics," which no one talks about anymore. It's over 20 years old, but I love that comic. Back when it was coming out, I was there like day one on CrossGen. So he was like, "All right, sure," and like that started our dialogue, and then I could have him come back and do other things. So you have to kind of find that thing. Although sometimes it works out against you. I remember
yeah,
tweeting and getting a response from Warren Ellis once. And I was like, I'm going to position something that no one will ever talk to him about. And it was, now I can't remember the name of the book. I think it was called Jack Cross. It was like a 4 issue, I think, Vertigo series. And so I mentioned that, and he's like, "Oh, that's the last thing I'd want to talk about." And then he never tweeted back after that. And I was like,
man.
"Oh no, that was my shot. Like I lost it. I thought I was going for something deep cut that would get his interest. Instead, I lost it."
Yeah.
So, anyways, I'm sorry for this tangent that we're on.
No, you're perfectly fine. I'm very okay with talking, so I'll definitely give it a shot. Once we hit 20 episodes next week, it's kind of just like no holds bar. I'm just gonna try to do everything I can because I think 20 is an okay number for a podcast. And
Absolutely.
well, my biggest fear with I'll just say this and then we'll get on to the books. My biggest fear with creators is that the show, first of all, I'm a child. Second of all, I curse a lot. So like I don't know if that's like because in a lot of our episodes, I don't know how many that you've actually like fully listened to, but it's kind of like the thing where we kind of like I'm saying like so many times we really appreciate this era but we also take off the rose tinted glasses and criticize it. And sometimes we're not the nicest about it, whether that be just exaggerations or just the way that we talk about things. Um,
Hmm.
that's always my fear when I ask these people if I'm like, hey, listen to an episode. And then I'm just like, I don't like that book. This book is, I have all these problems, but I don't know. Well, it's not everybody is going to like really care about that, because I feel if I didn't enjoy it, I wouldn't have the show at all. So,
Yeah, I think
for
that's
sure.
true. And to be honest, and like, I don't know how many people actually listen to the podcast or that they're going to be on the
Right.
show. To be honest, like, I think they're kind of like, all right, you want to talk about my material. I think they
Right.
assume that it's not going to be like, you're going to have him on and like immediately attack him for it, right? Like, I think
and,
they're like,
and I
if
never would with any of them, despite not liking certain books. It's more like talking to my idols than anything.
for sure. And I think that ultimately that will come across. Who cares if you're 25? Like, it doesn't
Yeah.
matter. Like,
Yeah.
it's at the end of the day, are you someone who's appreciated their work? And
Right.
that's what they will zero in on. And they do appreciate it. If you think about it, like a lot of comic creators, they kind of work in isolation, right?
Hmm.
They're not working in studios, they're working from home. They kind of don't get a lot of feedback. And so these days it's easier to get feedback. But when they were a lot of these creators working before, in the 80s and 90s, they weren't getting feedback like you could get now. So a lot of them don't even know what some of this work could even mean to someone. So again, I think there is really something nice to be able to say, like, oh, by the way, I actually really like this stuff. And they're like, oh, someone actually was paying attention to this. I have found sometimes you'll find something small. I always look for something, especially with artists, something small in an issue that I'm like, oh, there's something about this panel or something about this, and I'll bring that up. And more times than not, I don't know why, it ends up being the most important panel to that artist. It's happened, I think, 5 or 6 times where I've been like, oh, this panel, I really like this. What were you doing there? And like, you know what? This was my idea. This is something I did. Like, I'm really excited that you noticed this. Like, this really meant a lot to me. And sometimes like really small. It's like literally a small panel, but there's something about it that really energized them, and they like the cool storytelling trick they did there, and then you're in. Because the minute that they're like, oh, you're really paying attention to this stuff, you're not just kind of glossy, but you're actually, your stuff, they will respond. Because I listen to a lot of podcasts too, and like there's sometimes you'll have, an interviewer, and I'm like, I don't think they really know that book. Like
Hmm.
like they know the book, but they don't know the book, and you can tell. And I think a creator can tell too. So, anyways, I will get off
Yeah.
that.
That's been my favorite part about like meeting people in person. Last year when I did my rounds for Clone Saga people at Heroes Con in North Carolina, it was specifically Howard Mackey and Terry Kavanaugh. They were just like the most energetic people ever. And the
Hmm.
moment I walked up to them and I was like, "Hi, I love the Clone Saga, and that's all I care about. Thank you for that." It was like a whole other side of just like, you do like that whole thing. So that was really fun. And then my friend and I came back around, and I was just like Ben, and he was just like Kane. So we got a picture with him. It was really cool.
It's awesome.
But yeah, that was a really fun time. Like you said, honing in on that one niche thing and catches people off guard. Anyway, Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yeah, let's do it.
We will start with Spectacular Spider-Man number 251, Son of the Hunter, Part 1. This book was released on September 24th of 1997 with our usual suspects of JMD, Luke Ross, Al Milgrom, and John Callis. Norman's video has spread like wildfire, and the people of New York have begun to turn on Spider-Man. Pete isn't taking it too well, but MJ says she would have done the same thing in his shoes. Robbie notices that Norman has to have some dirt on Jonah. Robbie can tell Jonah hates Norman's guts. While discussing their new Bugle article, Jonah shows some restraint, but is back to his normal webhead hatred after a scolding from Norman. Robbie can't believe what's happening to this company. Flash finally admits himself into AA and confides the information to Betty at the Bugle. She apologizes for avoiding him and says that she's been the fixer all her life, and every time she tries to help, something bad happens. Ned, her brother, and she didn't want that for Flash. Flash says he doesn't want her to fix him anymore, just to be there for him. They both say they love each other, and Flash leaves the Bugle. As he leaves, Norman takes interest in Flash's ability to overcome demons. That could be of use. Peter catches the return of Kraven, who stopped a robbery earlier in the day, on TV and heads to the scene. But it was a ploy to get Spidey in the open, and Kraven attacks him. Kraven, revealing himself to be the only living son of Kraven the Hunter, Alexei Kravinoff, poisons Peter and says he will finish the job after his father failed to do so, and also use real bullets. And that's my quick summary of this issue. I was telling Adam off air that the the recaps in this episode are a little shorter because I was kind of breezing through these, and also I'm just very tired. So
Well, it's interesting. I do think that in these issues, though, to cut you some slack, there is a lot of just kind of characters fight,
yeah,
and we get more of that than I think we've been getting lately. This issue is interesting. So first of all, I think one thing that you always like to mention is where word balloons are on the wrong characters. So that definitely
yes,
happens here.
it does.
Um, when they're at ESU and you have a character talking, and you're like, wait a minute, that's not MJ talking. That's Jill talking.
Again, it's
So
always those two. They're always flipping them.
that's right. I This is an interesting issue. So first of all, the colors are fascinating because there's such a dark palette, and like when you have Spider-Man in the rain, you don't see the blues at all. It's almost more like a green. Now that being said, I'm colorblind, so I might be completely wrong, or I have a lot of colorblindness in me. But John Kelly's, I do find the colors really are different here. Like it's one tone almost for like the first 6 pages, and then it's almost like, oh, now it's just dark and dreary, and everything about the color usage really kind of shows that, especially when you have that first shot of Spider-Man swinging through the city, very dark. Is it just supposed to be nighttime? Is he trying to use that kind of night light effects, or is he just kind of not really drawing the costume blue enough? Like it's hard to tell. The shot of Kraven on an elephant makes no sense. But it's one of those things where like it's fun. It's comics, right?
Right,
But yeah, it's one of those things that really doesn't make any sense. I do think that this is in some ways one of the strongest issues of the bunch because it does have the best sense of pacing. You do feel like Spider-Man's like, it couldn't be Kraven. It couldn't be Kraven.
right,
He's dead. But what if it is? And again, he's just been confronted with Norman coming back after 5 years, so it seems more plausible than ever that maybe it is Kraven. What do I do about this? And even the way that JMD ends the issue with I use real bullets line, that's really chilling. Like, that's a
right.
fantastic. That's what comics do great, right? It's a great cliffhanger. You're like, oh shit, how does Spider-Man get out of this in the next issue? So I think this, in some ways, is one of the stronger issues. Even the subplots and him with MJ, I like that MJ feels more like her own person here and very like she's strong and she's just like, yeah, we're gonna deal with things. Don't worry, like not letting Peter be too worried and trying to like protect her, and she's kind of like, we'll do this together. And that she'll do the worrying, but not the worrying wife in the way that she was sometimes
Yeah.
drawn in the past. So I just thought this was of the bunch one of the stronger issues. Again, I like the idea of Aloysia Kravinoff. He's always been a cool Kravinoff to me. Uh, so yeah, overall I thought this was pretty solid.
Yeah, I was I had Alyosha like written down, but my
Hmm.
brain as I was reading that like did not want to say it. So I just said Alexi. And I was going to come back to it. But no, I definitely agree of the issues that we have today in terms of pacing for sure. This is the one that I think has the best. 254 I think probably has the worst. But we'll definitely get there. I like I don't know what your opinions on Luke Ross are, but I feel like at this point he's really kind of come into his form, and with Al Milgram on inks, it just kind of all comes together. But it's turning this book into the most like traditional looking. I think his faces especially are very reminiscent of John Romita Sr., especially at this time period. And I like that about this book. In terms of the stuff with Mary Jane, it's kind of a great contrast to how she is in even some of the other books at this time, because I have a constant hit like I do this constant thing in this podcast where I'm always bashing on how Mary Jane is written a lot of the
Mm.
times, because there's just this constant fighting that they're always doing in all these books, and it just gets old to me in a way. It's one of the I understand that she's worried because everything with the baby and everything with Norman and everything with Spider-Man, but she's been with him all these years and it's always been the same kind of stuff. But JMD understands them so well, probably the best out of everybody, that and I feel like he does everything the best here. But and when I was covering the last bunch of amazing issues, Mary Jane and those, she's just really hard to like get through because she's doing the whole promise me you won't be Spider-Man, promise me you won't be Spider-Man, please don't be Spider-Man. but
It's
she doesn't really
interesting
do that here.
because when you have Tom DeFalco writing those, he gets MJ, right?
Yeah,
But like
exactly.
maybe he just didn't know what to do with her at that point, which is possible. I mean, although I mean, you got to give credit to the writers. Like they put Peter and MJ back in school, so they're like,
Right.
okay, we need some sort of backdrop that we can start to develop and mine ideas from. So they put them back into school. You do have new characters kind of cropping up from school. So I mean, I understand the whole idea, and again, they're trying to de-age the characters in a very
Right.
subtle way because they're like, well, they're too old during the Clone Saga. They were married and having a kid, and that was too much apparently. So they're just like, no, we got to dial it back. So I do feel like this is in general like a more youthful character. Although again, the artistic interpretation doesn't always line up with how they want the characters to feel. More so with JR than anyone. I think he makes Peter feel the oldest in a
They're
good
very
way.
adult. Yeah.
Yeah, he feels like a man. He doesn't feel like a boy. Whereas at times, Luke Ross, to your point, kind of does channel a little bit more of that Johnny Meter Sr., kind of makes him look younger. I do feel like he has toned down a lot of his physicality, the over the top physicality that was present when he started in the book, and it's become a lot more toned down, a little bit more appropriate, and so it's not as wild.
They no longer look like Dragon Ball characters. I always harp on Goku Ben Riley in Sensational Spider-Man #7. I'm always
Mm-hmm.
talking about that. Yeah, I really enjoy this issue. I like how we're finally somewhere with Betty and Flash, because that's been kind of this ongoing thing in these previous issues too, where she's now just completely avoiding him at all costs, and now we're finally back to like why she's doing it, and accepting that what she did wasn't right. And I like that Norman again just has his fingers in everything. He's got a role for Flash to play. I just like that. In terms of the coloring, like you were talking about, I love it. I'm a big fan of John's work. He gets a lot of flack, actually. I don't know how aware you are of that, but
Mm-hmm.
especially in the Clone Saga issues, with Sal and Bill Sienkiewicz and him on as the art team, so much of that work gets criticized, and I feel like that was just like probably because of the inks. I don't know. I'm not a big fan of Bill on that title at the time,
I
but
100% agree with you. I will tell anyone until the cows come home that that is one of the worst artistic pairings I've ever seen because you have the graceful minimalist line work of Sal Buscema with the over rendered scratchiness of the inks of Bill Sienkiewicz, which is fine. But the problem is that it's so overpowering, it just becomes a Bill piece. It doesn't even
yeah,
feel like Sal at all. A proper inker accentuates the base sentimentalities of the pencils but doesn't go too far or influence the work too much. Like in theory, right?
right.
I would say that's the worst mismatch. I've mentioned similar thoughts to Ron Friends, and he will not come out and say that it was bad. He's so diplomatic and lovely as a gentleman, so he will never say that was a mismatch. But because I keep trying to like say, like, I don't know, like, is this a great match? And he's like, oh no, there's different artistic interpretations. He's very lovely and when appraising others' work. But for me, as a fan, I remember not liking Sal, or at least thinking I didn't like Sal because of Sinkovich. And then eventually, when I would see him without it, I was like, "Oh my God, this is a revelation!" Like
Yeah,
it taught me a lot. I've never thought that Khalees was the problem. I didn't even factor in the colors when I look at
yeah.
those issues and don't quite love them. It's more because I just think that Sal gets lost under Bill.
I think this is a Clone Saga tangent. I could talk about that for hours, but I think that Bill's inks work on certain issues like 226. I think that for that revelation, for that haunting moment, for those
Hmm.
emotional beats, that scratchy crazy does work. But in other issues, it's like, why does it? Why I can't tell what's happening half the time. So that's the biggest problem I have. But people always criticize murky colors um,
Hmm.
for those books. But I mean, whatever. I never had a problem with them. Here, I really love them. I've really dug the past couple issues where we have Peter dealing with all this stuff with Kraven and all these hallucinations he thinks he's having, seeing Kraven everywhere in these very rainy, very dark, very murky settings, because it's just setting the tone. They're trying to get that sort of Kraven's Last Hunt feeling where nothing feels quite right. And I like that Peter thinks that it's the chameleon because he just disappeared after his encounter with MJ, and he's just gone. And as we know, as the readers, he was shot by Kraven. Um, very much so, still alive, but shot nonetheless. Um, and I like their whole interaction. I think the elephant thing is very funny, but just there's so much of that Peter, especially right now after 250. We covered it last issue too, where he's just so on edge with everything.
Mm-hmm.
Nothing is quite right, and he's not having Kraven's return, and he just helped. He mentions that, I believe that's in this issue where he references, Soul of the Hunter, and he's like, I saved his soul. Why is he coming after me still? Was that even real? Who knows? So I just like how, again, I like this about JMD, but also sometimes it can bug me depending on context. Like Ben Reilly's Spider-Man, it bugs me. But here, I like that he references his own work, and it's very much that whole thing. Like, he's harping off of Kraven's Last Hunt because this is quite literally a Kraven story, and every time that there's a JMD Kraven story, it's always referencing the same things. Whether it be Soul the Hunter or Kraven's Last Hunt, it's always this.
I'm curious actually, like, and I've never asked JMD about this, but I wonder, like, was it his idea to kind of bring in another son? Because obviously there already was one, and he was dispatched pretty quick, and so and Howard Mackie was more than happy to offer him up as a sacrificial lamb to Cain. So you have another Kraven son, and I'm curious, like, was this something editorial wanted? And because once you have a Kraven son, like you have JMD doing it, so you eventually, no matter what you do, it's going to draw callbacks. It's going to draw comparisons to. I mean, at that point, it was already one of the most famous Spider-Man stories of all time. Its reputation has only gotten bigger with age. So I'm very curious. Like, was that very conscious decision? That like, I'm going to bring his son. It's going to end up being echoes of this thing. Like, you can't not do that. And there's
Right.
something about JMD and Kraven will always be linked. And you're right. Like, it feels sometimes like, can we get away from Kraven, from JMD? Like, I want to see him do other things. And it's interesting because this run we have another Goblin. He's very famous for dealing with one Goblin. He's dealing with another Kraven. He's very famous for dealing with another Kraven. Like, it's hard not to look at this at times very cynically and say, like, this is just kind of him doing the hits but redux. With like a slightly different version. Now, I don't think it ends up playing that way, but
No.
you could very superficially look at it and say, okay, well, what's JMD good at? Goblins, check. Kraven, check. So there is that to it. One thing I like about the use of Norman, which doesn't exist anymore in modern comics, and I always lament this because I think it did add something to the cinematic flair of comics because of what comics could do, is Norman smokes. He's literally like a cigar chomping villain. We don't have those in comics anymore, like at least not in Marvel comics. That's ever since Joe Quesada kind of took those out of comics, we don't
Yeah.
have characters smoking stogies or smoking cigarettes, and it does at times. I miss that. So when I read a comic and I'm like, oh yeah, there's just something about it. It adds a villainous flavor to him. Whereas like good guys have chomping cigars, bad guys smoke cigarettes. I don't know
Yeah.
why. That's just the way it is. Red Skull smokes cigarettes. Like, so I just kind of like that. We're definitely reading a time capsule of a time before they were outlawed.
Yeah. Ironically, still with the Comics Code Authority, and they're smoking cigarettes, and without it, they're not.
Yeah, right.
So, what a world we live in, huh? Overall, yeah. I mean, I enjoyed this book as a whole. Just a lot of fun, classic JMD in a way. It's got everything you want. It's got the build up. It's got the Cravens. It's got the emotional beats, and it's got your focus on the side characters, but not overwhelmingly so, and not distractingly so either. So
Mm-hmm.
it's all about getting that pacing right, and 9 times out of 10, he always does.
Last comment I'll make is on page 21. Luke Ross does one of my favorite things, which is having the classic like Spider-Man moving so fast that we have that kind of the lighter penciled silhouettes of it.
Yeah,
And I love the coloring effects that they often do on these silhouettes. They don't do it as often anymore, and they definitely don't use the same type of color palette. So I love this. I love that you can see how fast he is just by kind of arcing and tracing his movement. Love this effect. I know Mark Bagley did this a lot. Mark Bennett did this a lot. I mean,
John
obviously,
Romita Jr. does it quite a
That's
bit
true.
too later on.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So I love this, and I love seeing it.
Yeah, it's a great effect. My favorite one of those, I think, it's not when Peter's fighting the Juggernaut in Peter Parker Spider-Man 84 or whatever that was. That was one of my favorites. I really liked just the way that it was like bah, 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 and getting nowhere was the best
Yeah.
part with that one. All right, I'll put a number on it. I almost forgot. It's like an 8 out of 10 for me. It's a good book. It's a fun
Yeah,
book.
I maybe give it a 7.5, 8. I have to think about it. I forgot completely that we might have to do that.
Yeah, it's fine.
But yeah, I put
Catch you
in
off
that.
guard.
Yeah, it wasn't bad. It wasn't the best. It was good. It was a good
Yep.
comic.
All right, let's move on to Spectacular Spider-Man 252, titled, appropriately so, Son of the Hunter Part 2. It's very nice. The three-parter is called the same thing for once. Released on October 22nd of 1997, we have James DeMatteis with guest penciler Mike Deodato, before he was Mike Deodato Jr., Al Milgrom, and John Callis. I quite like Mike Deodato on this specific issue. I've always liked, I mean, his Spider-Man work in the Straczynski era is also pretty good, but it was a pleasant surprise because I forgot that he guest penciled this issue.
It's very it's very 90s Diodato. I don't mean that in a mean way. I just like that you can tell that he goes through different eras. I remember
Yeah.
when I talked to him once about his work, and he was just saying that like the 90s were when he took on too many projects.
Yeah.
So he felt himself very pulled in every direction. He had his studio, but he's like, it wasn't my best work. There was too much work, but I didn't know how to say no. I said yes to everything. I think this is slightly after that kind of the crescendo of that kind of say yes to everything period. It's interesting because when we think of him now, we think of him as a big name. The fact that he's just kind of a one issue guest pencil, I mean, he was already a name at this time. Like he'd already done some stuff that was important, and yet they somehow tapped him for a random issue of Spectacular Spider-Man.
Yeah.
Like, I would love to know how that happened. Like, I don't think he would necessarily even know, but I would love to talk to who edited this. Is this
That's
this
Ralph, should
it is
be.
Ralph. So I'm curious. Like, I'd love to ask Ralph such a very specific question. He probably be like, I've edited thousands of books. What are you talking about? But I'd love to know, like, how did Mike Deodato end up being a fill-in for Luke Ross? Like, it's interesting because they're not tonally that dissimilar from each other, so it
Right.
makes sense why they'd be similar and why it'd be a good fill-in. But yeah, it's the middle of an arc, and you have to schedule a fill-in. So I'm surprised. I guess after 250, maybe Luke Ross was just running a little too fast on fumes.
Yeah.
And then, he was able to get 251 out there, but then couldn't quite pull it together for 220, 252. I don't know. But I would imagine 250 has to be a part of the reason why, given the length of that issue.
Yeah. I think Mike's work here looks a lot more like Joe Bennett, what Joe Bennett was doing on Unlimited
Hmm.
around like during the Clone Saga time and a little bit after, because he completely changes his style once he hops on Amazing Spider-Man.
That's
But
true.
before, or like regularly on Amazing Spider-Man at least. Um, but I mean, they kind of have that same flavor to them, and you can definitely tell this is Deodato by Calypso. So once you see that, you're like, yeah, that's right. That's a Mike girl.
Hmm.
Right. So Son of the Hunter Part 2. Much to everyone's surprise, instead of killing Peter, Alyosha wants to learn about Kraven from his father's greatest enemy. He was abandoned as a child and raised by wild animals of the jungle. He has a primal side to him that unleashes itself. He's had very little contact with his father and traveled to America in hopes of learning more about his legacy. Peter's pretty shocked, unsurprisingly, but agrees to help. He recollects his experiences with Kraven, not taking him too seriously at first, but then being forced to during Kraven's last hunt. Before any more can happen, the two are attacked by Calypso and her army. She wants revenge on Alyosha for making her think that Sergei was alive, and also for allying himself with Spider-Man. She drugs them both, cages them up, and uses her herbs and shit to make them primal, pitting them against each other. Meanwhile, Norman meets with a doctor going by Professor Angst. Norman hopes to use the doctor's vast knowledge of human emotion and anxiety to study someone. Of course, it's Spider-Man. In Forest Hills, Aunt Anna believes that Peter is having an affair. MJ laughs it off by saying how Peter is the most loyal puppy dog of a man she's ever met, but Anna refuses to believe it. She doesn't want MJ to be hurt, like she was. Again, a pretty straightforward, to the point um, recap, but we'll get into it in discussion at least. I think it's really fun that they give Kraven's Last Hunt a name in canon. I like when books do that, when they're just like, well, the papers called it this, so it's an excuse for them to use the actual title of the book. I just think that's fun.
No, absolutely. I think they did that with Maximum Carnage too.
Yeah,
Like so I do think that is a fun way of doing it. I have to say, like, I would say the first 11 pages, I'm really invested. Like,
yeah,
I'm really into this because you think it's going to be one thing, and instead, Aloysia, is combating his own issues and just really wants to know more about his dad. And there's no one who can tell him more than Spider-Man. And the idea that he's read the journals and what he thinks about what was happening to his dad's mind and his mentality in the last few years of his life, I think is really interesting. It definitely feels like it's right in JMD's wheelhouse
yes,
to talk about fathers and sons and what that, and the impact on someone who looked up to this person that they've got to see only from afar and wants to know more about them because now they're dead and now they can't talk to them directly. So I think there's really something very powerful to that. Then the issue introduces Calypso, and I kind of check out because I find like it just I feel like he really had me on the hook. He got me emotionally. I was invested. I cared, and then I just felt like I didn't care as much once Calypso was there. It did make me realize I forgot that he slept with Calypso a couple
yeah,
issues ago,
yeah.
which
It
is
was
also kind of weird.
250, I think, is when it happened.
Yeah. So that I don't necessarily love. But again, even some of the ideas there are present. It's just I feel like I don't know. I almost feel like this could have just been 2 issues. Like I feel like you almost didn't need the third. Like it just felt like a lot of extra. Like I'm gonna mind control and I'm gonna make you guys fight each other. I just felt like I'm not really interested in this as much. I don't know what Calypso really gets out of this. I don't really understand what her motivations are. She's just angry, but
Yeah,
like she's fought Spider-Man before. They kind of moved on from this, so now they're going to come back to this. So I just didn't understand the point of that. And then it's interesting, in the middle of that, we also get the interlude, which I guess you didn't mention, where you have the Gibbon and the Grizzly in
oh
their
yeah,
vehicle,
yeah. I didn't mention that, but yeah, I
which
was
is a
gonna
fun
get to
little
it.
two pages, and yeah, it's nice to have a little bit of levity in an issue that's otherwise very trying to be serious. But yeah, so the first half, as I said, really strong, really good writing. The latter half is fine. It did feel like it leaned in more on the fact that, like, let's give Diodato some fun stuff to draw. He draws sexy ladies. Let's make sure there's a sexy lady in the rain. But it didn't feel like it was story first. It felt like something else. But that being said, also like the last page where you have that cool shot from behind Kraven looking up, and you can see Spider-Man kind of between Kraven's legs, and you see them kind of coming towards each other. That is excellent. Like there's some really cool this storytelling decisions made by Diodato here, which I really liked. I just couldn't quite, I felt like myself glossing over the last half because I just felt like it wasn't giving me anything new. It just felt very repetitive.
Yeah, I mean, I do completely agree with that. I think I love how focused Alyosha is on like my father went mad. Like
Hmm.
nothing, you didn't do anything. Like you became a point of obsession, and he took that obsession too far, and obviously took his own life. I like that he says that in the next issue too. Spoiler alert! But it's just nice that I love the subversion, and in a way, in some way, I think you can deter see this as like, so why did he even try to go after Spider-Man in the first place if he just wanted to talk? But at the same time, that's so Kraven the Hunter, and I think that's the best part is it's like he's trying to learn about his father while also learning from the greatest enemy. And how do you set up Spider-Man? You attack him. So it was very convincing, and I love that he drugged him just to test him. He like knew he was going to dodge that bullet because I mean his goal obviously wasn't to kill Spider-Man for the conversation, but I really just enjoyed that whole interaction that they have when it's just they're sitting there and Peter's like, well, I guess I should just tell him. Like he doesn't seem like he actually wants to kill me. But everything with Calypso is very distracting. I've never really cared for her as a character at all. I know she has that deep connection with Kraven, but honestly, in with Kraven's Last Hunt being the definitive Kraven story, there's no Calypso at all. So you just have to deal with the aftermath and things that happened later on. Um, and I guess the most famous Calypso book would be Torment at that point, which style over substance. So I've just never really cared about her at all. It is just kind of a whatever. The stuff with Grizzly and Gibbon is fun as a continuation of 246. Um, but also I think personally it just distracts too much from a book that's already kind of falling apart near the end.
Hmm.
Especially if we have this whole new drama with Anna and Mary Jane, and this whole Peter having an affair, and what's Anna's big secret, and what all this stuff we're going to learn later on. Um, I don't know. While it was fun, I was just kind of like, okay, let's move on here. And granted, it was only 2 pages, but it's 2 pages of real estate in a book that was already losing us less than halfway through at that point.
Yeah, it is interesting. I'm like, okay, if we take that out, where do I want to see those pages applied? And like, I
Mm-hmm.
guess I just want to see more of the first half.
Yeah, if they would have given 2 more pages of that conversation.
Yeah, and it's interesting as you mentioned. Like, I love the idea that Aloysius like, I know you have this like warning sense. You can tell I'm not trying to hurt you. Like, and that's how he kind of gets Peter to buy in and just be like, oh, I can kind of take my guard down a little bit and just kind of tell him what he wants. And as you say, it is a subversion because the comics trope is, these characters are going to fight and characters are only going to want revenge when someone dies. Like, it's just there's archetypes for a reason. So it's nice to have him be like, no, I've read his writings. He was crazy. Like he definitely had lost it. He wasn't in his right mind. I just want to understand more. But at the same time, as you say, he's also the son of Kraven the Hunter, and so the only way he can appease his dad and this idea of his father is to do what his dad would have done. So to be a hunter like his dad, to be able to master the hunt. So again, I think it's a great subversion of what you expect the trope to be. I also like that he's fighting his own bestial nature.
Yes. Yeah.
That he's not technically like perfectly sound mind himself. He's dealing with something else, part of how he was, brought up. I would imagine, depending on when Craven first took all those jungle herbs and all the other stuff and potions he took, was it before he even had Aloysia, and therefore that's part of maybe his mental makeup too, because he's, there's other things going on. Like, I like that idea, and I really wanted to see more of Aloysia. And it's interesting because I think after everything over in this run of Spectacular, I could be wrong. Isn't his next appearance in Get Craven where he's completely different?
Yes. Yes, it is. And
Which they do eventually kind of forget about and move back into something more
yeah,
akin to the regular Cravenoff family.
Get Craven is bad.
Who wrote it? Was it Zimmerman?
Don't remember.
Okay.
I would have to check, but I really, yeah, I think we've briefly talked about that book at some point on the show, and maybe if I have the time later, I want to just do like a riff track basically for
Hmm.
that story. But yeah, no, I the way what they do with him there is that, yeah, it's just silly.
They try
Um,
something different. I'm trying to give
yeah,
more grace to trying new things, but ultimately, did I think it was enjoyable? No.
I just
It
think
was.
it's in that weird era of books where they were just I don't know what they're even trying to do with like Get Craven and Trouble and what was that? What's the lizard one where Martha Connors dies? What is that called?
Oh, was that quality of life?
Yeah, Quality of Life. The like scary CGI one. So like all of those books are in that same like early 2000s time period, and they're just
They're
rough.
trying new. They're trying new things. I mean, you could say that. Like, I wasn't a big fan of the first arc of like Tangled Web. I know that
Hmm.
some people like the Thousand, but I didn't like that, and I didn't like the art either. To be fair, that's also me remembering what an 18-year-old thought of it. Maybe I
Hmm.
would feel differently now. But yeah, I think they were taking more wild swings at what Spider-Man could be and what a story could be. I mean, the fact that they even had web spinners or Tangled Web, like these were very much off the beaten path, and I think if you look at the timeline, I think that's when Axel Alonso came on to the Spider books, and he was really shaking things up and doing different things because I believe he had come from Vertigo. So you have a more of a Vertigo infused feeling on some of the Spider books. And I think I could be wrong about some of the timeline, but I think that's about right. So if you think about it with that context, it makes sense that this wasn't Ralph Macchio coming up with those books.
Yeah.
This isn't someone died in the wool 30 years Marvel. This is
Yeah, it
someone.
is the change of the guard thing, yeah. So
And sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't. I did
yeah.
check. It was Ron Zimmerman who
Okay.
wrote Get Kraven. So.
What a book. What a book. Last thing I want to say about this is I as much as I don't really care for Calypso and kind of this whole we gotta make them fight each other because they have to fight each other. It's a superhero comic.
Hmm.
Feral nature of both what is at the end of this book and what Ross does next issue is just it's great in terms of with Alyosha doing this man versus beast internal thing. He's fully succumbing to that nature, and we have Peter in a way that we haven't seen him a whole lot before, especially not recently, where he is fed up and he's got all this pent up aggression, and now he's hyped up on drugs that let him get that aggression out. It's such an interesting thing that the like monkey part of the brain that just wants to see them beat each other to death, as a comic book person just wanting to watch them fight, you want to see that. And I like that. Again, it's kind of a subversion next issue where well, it's not really a subversion because it's Peter where he breaks free of it. But as of context of this book, I like how really edgy and exaggerated their like thought boxes are and whatnot.
Hmm.
Just we're gonna kill him. We're gonna kill each other. I just want the blood, the blood, the blood, the blood. It's just fun. I don't know. Just despite not caring for it too much, it is fun. So I
Hmm.
can't even really harp on it too much.
Okay.
So that's that. That being said, 6.5 out of 10.
I'd agree with that. Like again, I think I want to stress that these are not bad comics.
No, no, not
Um,
at all.
like I might have varying degrees of enjoyment, but like they're not bad comics. The art isn't bad. The storytelling is clear. It's just varying degrees of enjoyment level. But at least they're clear comics. I read bad comics. These aren't
Yeah.
those.
I don't think really any of these books so far. I just in general for the show. I've never had one where I finish reading it and I go, I am so glad that's over. And I have definitely had that before. with many a comic in my time. All right, Spectacular Spider-Man 253, Son of the Hunter Part 3, November 26th of 1997, with JMD, Luke Ross, new inker Dan Green, and John Callis. As Calypso's drums beat, Kraven and Spider-Man become feral and fight each other against their will. Louder and louder the drums pound, trying to convince Peter he's some sort of heartless murderer, but he's not. He uses his unbreakable will to fight against Calypso's control, throwing a spear into her arm. The drums stop, and Kraven comes to his senses too. Spidey and Kraven use their pent-up aggression and team up against Calypso's army, until Kraven's pet lion almost kills Calypso. He stops the lion from doing so, takes her hand, and apologizes for not going to her in the first place. Sergei loved her so much, and Alyosha was jealous of the love that he never received. He also makes sure to tell Calypso she's wrong about Spider-Man. Sergei was killed by the madness of the hunt and not Spider-Man himself. That madness took his half-brother Vladimir, his brother Vladimir as well. Alyosha leaves with Calypso, leaving Peter to head home. Once home, Pete goes down to eat some leftovers and is stopped by Anna. She thinks Peter is having an affair, but obviously both Peter and MJ know the truth. MJ comes down and seemingly reveals to Anna that Peter is Spider-Man. Over at Ravencroft, Professor Angst gets access to the cell of one of the inmates, promising him the ability to become an alpha if he takes care of a certain spider problem. In the end, Alyosha kills Calypso and her men as he exclaims the slaughter has begun. And there you go. The ending of the Kraven story.
Mm-hmm.
Almost abruptly so, but again, we get some cool art and some cool action.
Yeah, I'm very torn on this one. First of all, I will say I don't think Dan Green does quite as solid a job as Milgram. I think Milgram gets into the details more and
Yeah, I
adds a
think it's a
lot.
lot looser, yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting. I'd have to go back, and you probably know better than me. Like, how long was Milgram inking over Luke Ross? Because we were talking about how Luke Ross has come more into his own in the book.
Mm-hmm.
Is it partially that he's got Milgram kind of sanding off the edges and adding in a little bit extra details here and there, which are adding more of the grounding to it? Because this felt a lot looser, and it felt like Dan Green just wasn't adding a lot, and maybe Milgram was.
Yeah, when it comes to, I mean, Milgram and Green are actually they're like the flip inkers. Like there are books like 247 and I think 249 where they're both credited on doing inks. So like both of them have experience with Luke Ross, obviously, but in terms of telling who's who, it very well could be that Milgram's inking style on, the issues where it's just him inking and not anybody else kind of has that more refined look versus the looser inks.
Interesting.
I'm trying to double check just to see. Yeah, I mean they're pretty much both credited on just about every single issue that there is. With Milgram
Interesting.
doing some of them by himself, and even there are some other inkers too. I forgot about John Stanisi, who also did like 245 and stuff. So there's quite a few different groups of people. But I mean, if you look at, like you were saying, if you look at 245, that story with Chameleon, and look at this, it looks like two almost completely different pencilers. So I think it does have a lot to do with the finishes.
Mm-hmm. This issue, again, a lot of fighting,
Yeah.
which is just fine. It felt, again, this whole arc where you have Peter kind of under control of something else, whether he's being drugged in the first issue, or now kind of the voodoo of Calypso. And then I think this was kind of a misstep by JMD in that the next issue, it's another mind control, or like, someone going into someone's mind. And it
Mm-hmm.
just, by the end of it, it's just kind of like enough. Like it felt like too much trying to kind of be into Peter's memories and the memory altering and personality altering, that it was just the close proximity of all these things happening in just a few issues, again, as a reader, made me kind of bored with it and be like, I'm not as invested in the, like, I'm thinking specifically of 254. I feel like I would have been more invested in that story if it wasn't right after this one.
Mm-hmm.
That we just had similar style of like something with Peter's head. I just didn't need to do that right away. Again, like the fighting in this kind of goes on a while. Finally, Peter kind of breaks the spell, and then, as you said, it feels very abrupt at that point. That just kind of like, okay, we're cool, we're cool. Him and Aloysia are fine. They're gonna, make sure that the lion doesn't hurt Calypso. Aloysia kind of asks for forgiveness, and I guess, let me ask how you read this. Do you read this as Aloysius saying whatever he needs to get out of this situation so he can murder her later? Or is it just uncontrollable bloodlust later, which doesn't feel incongruous with what we're seeing here? Like, I'm trying to find a way that has this make sense, and I don't know if it does.
Yeah, if I had to pick one, I'd pick the latter, because the way that I read the dialogue in the scene where they're, shaking hands and making up, he seems genuine. Because
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if he would go into like that level of like, you had the love my father never gave me, and like all this very personal stuff, if he was just trying to kiss and make up to kill later. But also, either way that you look at it doesn't make much sense to me. When I first read this book years ago, I didn't even think Calypso was dead.
Mm.
Like, I just thought that he knocked her out, because I kind of wasn't, I didn't really look at the page hard enough, and the context. But I mean, especially when I'm looking at it now, like, yeah, she's dead. And even in like notes that I wrote before, I was like, he beats her up, and I'm like, no, she's just dead.
Mm-hmm.
And it's unfortunate, because it's another one of those things that just goes nowhere, but also was so abrupt at the end of this issue, because before that, I mean, we had all the stuff with the family. So it's like, okay, here's the last page, we're done, we'll never talk about it again.
Yeah, it made me feel like why did it even need to happen? Because like you have these two characters kind of saying, okay, we're cool now, and I'm gonna, I want to learn more about my dad.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I didn't need anything after that. That
Right.
that that felt like it was tied off. So then having this other ending, which feels completely out of left field, it's harder because we have no context for it. Like, how did he go feral? And also, all the people are killed downstairs. When did he kill them
Mm-hmm.
and then kill her? Like, I guess the more I think about it, the more I'm just like, I don't know if I understand even the sequencing or how this happens and why this would happen. She's in a totally different form of dress
Yeah,
than we've seen her before.
and
So
he's completely shirtless. So like, were they sleeping together again and something happened, or yeah, it's just very
like
very confusing.
he almost looks more like Conan here too, like
Yeah,
less like himself and more like. So yeah, it definitely threw me off. I think if you took those like 2 pages, not even 2 pages, 1 page and like
yeah, like
the
page
bottom
and four
quarter of an.
panels.
Yeah, if you took those out, I think I was like, oh, okay. It ended on a. I would actually say it ended on a good cliffhanger. I actually think that the real estate could have been better used for that moment where she's like Peter Parker's Spider-Man to Aunt Anna. That's a great jaw-dropping, like mic drop moment. Like, what are you going to do after that? And instead, we cut to the Kravinoff estate, I guess, but wasn't that already bombed? Like
Mm.
the top half of that? Like I just it brings up so many questions and makes the issue end in a very inelegant way. So I just don't understand.
Yeah, I definitely, yeah, it's a very strange ending. Um, one thing that I really do like in this issue is once they shake hands and go their separate ways, I like that Peter finds his grave and like has that moment of self reflection. That's a very JMD moment, just for the book in general.
So I have a question about that. So the people we knew that there had been people on the grounds, right, back
Mhm.
during Craven's Last Hunt. So they just filled in the grave
Yeah,
like nothing happened, and they just left the gravestone alone, like they didn't do anything about it.
guess so. It must
Because
have
this
been
is
one of
supposed to
those
be
things.
it's supposed to be 2 years later, right? Like I think they specifically mentioned the passage of time. This
Hmm.
is 2 years that so no one's touched this gravestone, no one's defaced it, no one's bothered with it. It's just been here.
Yeah, I mean, we already saw. I mean, in Mackey's adjective list, they were just letting anybody into the estates.
Mm.
And someone might have just been like, "Oh, there's a big hole there," and just decided to fill it for fun. Like you never know. It couldn't. It doesn't even have to be groundskeepers, or maybe Vladimir decided to do it just out of spite because maybe he would rebury Spider-Man. Who knows?
Yeah, maybe. And
Yeah,
so, as you mentioned before, like you have Dr. Angst, so we have setting up the next issue, which I do
yeah,
like when JMD does go to the effort of doing that. I gotta say, I like the subplot with Peter and MJ, like the idea of like because if you think about it, that's a pretty plausible explanation that Anna has in her head. There's like he keeps disappearing. He's not where he should be. He's technically he missed an exam that was supposed to be in 30 minutes.
yeah.
Like that's a choice. Like he knew he wasn't going to make it. But yeah, there's just it makes sense that someone would think, well, there's something going on with this guy. He keeps disappearing. His wife seems to be making excuses for him. It seems like he's supposed to be home and then he's not, and then she's making another excuse. Like, what other reason would there be than he must be unfaithful, and she's just kind of covering up because she can't deal with it? That
Hmm.
is a completely plausible,
Yeah,
reasonable thing that someone would think. So I like that. Anna's like, no way, like this is what this is, and MJ's just laughing in her face, being like, no, no. And I like that Anna's like upset about that because again,
yeah,
that feels plausible. She's like, don't you see, like this is plain as day. You think it's a joke, but like he's cheating on you. Like, so I really like that very human element, and I actually, to be honest, couldn't remember when I got to that issue in my reread. I'm like, I actually don't know what happens next.
oh yeah,
At least when I got to the end of 253 because it'd been so long. Because in my head, in this era, when I think of his identity being potentially compromised, all I think about is Hope, the girl from
yeah,
next door, which I think was a much better, cooler kind of conceit because this character, does a symbol to him, and
yeah,
he's like, "Oh my god, I'm freaking out." What does this deaf girl think? Like, I think that to me was a more compelling sense of like, "Oh my god, what do I do now?" than this.
yeah. I think it's nice that they gave Anna kind of something to do.
Hmm.
Because she for the longest time in these books, she's kind of just been either the annoyance or completely oblivious. Because in Sensational, you have her where she's kind of just playing nanny to Hope,
Hmm.
at this point at least. And I really like that aspect. I like the neighbors stuff, um, in those books. And then you just have like the whole thing with the laundry, the past couple issues, and like all this other stuff that's just ha ha ha, they live in the same house, isn't that fun? But now she's actually being given something to do, and we do learn more about her as a character later on,
Hmm.
why she's so quick to jump to affair as the like what she believes is happening. But yeah, no, I think of all the conflicts, I do like this one specifically. It's cool to get that very human story in this kind of crazy voodoo magic issue, because we had a lot of human moments last issue, and then even the issue before. But now we have this very personal, at-home story that I wish was referenced in the other books. Overall, it's fine. I would probably give it the same rating as last issue.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think that's fair. One thing I just realized, I don't know if I mentioned this last time. It's a funny aside because as we're having this conversation, or I guess login name is Ben Riley for this. When we record, it did make me remember. So when I went to university, I would have been, let's see, I would have been 19, about almost 19. So I go to university. I'm a big comic book fan, big Marvel fan. And so the guy who has a room adjacent to mine with a connecting door. So on our floor, everyone had kind of their own solo rooms, but mine was the only one that had someone else's room essentially on the other side. We had a door we could lock. So as luck would have it, he's huge into comics, more a DC fan at the time, although he also liked Spider-Man.
Mm-hmm.
But his name was Ben Riley.
Huh.
I at least, well, it was technically Bennett Riley, I should say, but he went by Ben Riley. And I was like, that is so cool. I love everything Clone Saga. And he's like, me too. It's literally my name's, I have the same name. So it just made me think of that.
I mean, that's fun. If I ever met a person named Ben Riley, I'd be like, he's real.
Yeah. Well, the fact that he was a comic book fan and knew Spider-Man comics, and his dad had been a Spider-Man fan for like ever. And his brothers were Oliver and Quinn, and I'm like, well, that's not an accident. Like that's obviously something's going on there.
Yeah, that's super fun. All right.
254.
Let's take it home with 254. This is titled Angst, from December 24th of 1997. Merry Christmas. We open on Peter strapped up by Professor Angst and hooked up to a machine that is studying his endurance. Angst wishes to see how strong Spidey's will is, and he's in for a rude awakening. Cutting to a flashback of how things got this way, Pete is at the Bugle talking with Norman about some photos he recently took, when Robbie storms out of JJ's office and declares he's done with the Bugle. Pete tries to talk to Jonah about it, but Jonah forces Peter to leave. He damns Osborn under his breath and reveals that he has a gun hidden in his desk. Ben Urich is brought in to talk to Norman, but instead of being fired, since Urich made the book saying Norman was the Goblin, Norman enlists Urich to help find the real Green Goblin and clear their name. After this, Norman is attacked by Professor Angst's patient, Sir, forcing Peter to swing into action despite the price on his head. Sir takes Pete up in a helicopter, and Pete realizes that it was all set up by Norman. That's what leads to where he is now. Pete is hit with flashes of those he's lost. Uncle Ben, Ben Riley, Gwen, etc. But a vision of Aunt May calms him down. Angst is fascinated by this triumph and asks his assistant Sir to approach Spidey. The memory of his mom and dad's death is shown to him, Ben delivering the news, and Pete breaks free from the machine. Angst knocks him out once more and hopes to drug Spidey to place him back into the world with no recollection of the events that transpired. Peter wakes up instead and lashes out against Angst, who realizes that Sir is gone. Peter swears revenge on Norman, as per usual, and says Angst is going down with him. Norman arrives from the shadows and comments on Peter's resilience, and Angst worries that Spider-Man has rubbed off on Sir. He's got no control over killing and revenge, as he watches them leave. Cool. And that's that.
So I have a question for you. What happened with Aunt Anna?
Who cares?
You end a cliffhanger. I want to know what happens next. It's not here.
Yeah, and it's not next issue either.
So did they just drop that completely?
No, they do come back to it because
I couldn't remember.
They revealed that like Aunt Anna had a lover and she was cheated on and like all this stuff.
Okay,
so like we get back to it, but first we have to set up Spider Hunt, and then we have to do Spider Hunt, and then we have to get back to it in because I guess it would be 256, but even then we're kind of just that's straight into Identity Crisis too. So like we have all this stuff being set up that we gotta wait to get that resolution. It is a crazy cliffhanger to leave off on, because we don't know whether or not Anna truly knows Peter's identity.
Mm-hmm.
She
That's
doesn't, because she laughs
no.
it off in the issue when we get back to it. But yeah, it just goes nowhere for the time being. I guess it
Yeah,
was mandated probably, but damn.
yeah, it's so bizarre. So one thing I did note, so this particular issue, stories by JMD, but he doesn't do the script. That's Tom DeFalco. And
Yeah.
the next issue, which is chapter 4 of Spider Hunt, it's inverted, where
Hmm.
Tom does the story, and then the actual scripting is by JMD. So it's very interesting, kind of flip flopping as to why that even happened. Because I understand it more with Spider Hunt, because I guess maybe that was Tom's baby. I would have to check. But I don't really understand why he was doing the scripting over JMD's plots in 254. So that seems very bizarre. And we're right near the end of JMD anyway. I mean, he does 256, 257, leaves after the first chapter of the Prodigy storyline, and
Hmm.
then Glenn Greenberg comes in to finish it out. Like, what is happening in the book at the time? Like, it's just
Yeah.
like I'm curious. Again, I guess only Ralph could really answer this, but like, at what point did they know for sure the relaunch was about to happen, and that they were just kind of setting up the deck for that, and that they were also going to bring John Byrne on, and that everything was going to radically change? Because you see, why else would he exit in the middle of a storyline? Like, it doesn't really
Yeah.
make a lot of sense. Not that Greenberg doesn't do a good job, because I think as an adult I know that he takes over, but as a kid I don't think I noticed. I was like, oh, it's just Spider-Man doing Spider-Man things. And then you have Roger Stern and Glenn Greenberg working on Goblins at the Gate, which is one of my favorite storylines. So it's just a very peculiar area. I would say 254 is not my favorite, and
Yeah.
I don't even know if it does much to set up anything. Like 88 of Peter Parker Spider-Man was a definitive, like, we're going to set up a new idea, a new concept that we're going to spin Spider Hunt out of this. That seems great. This, I don't know what this was. I don't really like Sir that much as a character. Again, I didn't need more mind control and more kind of mental manipulation. I understand it's kind of an interesting conceit for how you're going to layer out the story in terms of narrative, as opposed to just your typical issue. Instead, it's like him remembering things and then jumping back and forth.
Yeah.
So that's kind of an interesting way to run the narrative. But even then, like, there's some stuff where, like, I don't know, like, I like the pieces that don't involve him in the chair. Like, I
Hmm.
like him at the Bugle and having Robbie want to quit because he just can't handle what's going on with J. Jonah Jameson ever since Norman Osborn took over the Bugle. That's cool. I'm in for that. I think that's really thrilling and interesting stuff, because we think of Robbie Robinson as being this beacon of hope at the Bugle, and the steady hand at the ship, and now it's enough for him to want to quit. I think is a great idea. So I'm so invested in that stuff. Everything with Sir and Spider-Man, having to once again make peace with the people
Right.
he's failed in his life. Like, that's such a there's no water in that well. I just feel like it's so overdone and so over. They just go to it too often that I didn't find that part that interesting.
And not even the Ben Riley mention can save me on this one, because I think that it. So especially if you look at it in the grand scheme with hindsight of where things go, this is the most pointless issue I think of this entire time period in Spectacular. These characters don't come back. Angst
Mm.
does not come back. Sir does not come back. What was the point of establishing them at all for 2 issues prior?
Mm-hmm.
Only, or well, 3 issues prior, only to get to this, which is just another talking heads fest and guilt trip that Peter has to triumph from, only for it once again to be resolved pretty quickly with some punches, because Angst doesn't, he can't fight back, and for Norman to come out of the shadows and go, "I'm here too," and that's the book. It doesn't continue anything that we've been talking about with Anna and MJ, this whole gigantic revelation, like we were saying, and it serves no purpose at all to me. Um, I'm not a fan, and despite you know the things with Robbie are interesting, and it's cool to see again something carried over from Amazing, and whether that has to do with DeFalco scripting the book and maybe they were working hand in hand with that, it's quite possible. Um, but yeah, it's just such a weird comic in general, especially following reading these in a row. I mean, obviously you're not doing that when they're coming out; it's a monthly book. But even I feel someone waiting a month for this revelation to be resolved with the family, and it's just like, nah. Instead, he's strapped to a chair, and he has to get out, and that's it. And we have this focus on Sir, who I glossed over, but has mental trauma and issues of his own, and Peter's resilience and willingness to fight kind of inspires him to fight against Angst. But again, why do I care?
Mm-hmm.
Is the biggest question that I have. So I don't mean to be negative Nancy, but I just I don't I don't understand why this is even here.
I do try to think about like what was happening at the time. So like
Hmm.
again, how early was editorial telling them we're going to cross over the
Yeah.
books? We've let you guys do your own thing. There hasn't really been a lot of cross pollination lately. You've mentioned some things here and there, but generally speaking, the books have been separate. Now we're going to bring you guys back together because it's been what? How many months has it been at this point? Like 8 or 9 months? Maybe longer than that.
It's I mean it's
Well,
over
two.
a year at this point.
Yeah, it's like 14 issues, right? Because you have 241 was like the first kind of post Clone Saga
Right.
spectacular. Now we got 214. Sorry,
Yeah.
254.
So
So that's 14.
From November to December, yeah. So
You've
much
had a
of
year
the
to do your
year.
own. You've had a year to do your own stories. So now we're going to bring this back together. So I'm curious if he had different ideas here, and then it just kind of got smushed into one issue as opposed to two. That would have been more on editorial's fault for maybe not getting ahead of it earlier. And who knows how quickly they put this type of stuff together at the time. Again, Marvel's facing bankruptcy in this period. Like it's not a good time to be working at Marvel. So I do try to give a little bit of grace to the creative team that they might have been dealing with impossible tasks. Maybe their mandates were constantly changing about what they were going to be doing, how many issues they had to do it, and then maybe that's why we don't really get much resolutions here because they lost the page count or they lost the issues that they thought they might have to tell the story, and they just have to move on to the next thing. Maybe I'm just reaching a little bit and being a little bit of an apologist, but I do try to wonder like they don't mean to make a comic that's not enjoyable, but
Oh
and
no.
it and it has its moments. And again, for me, the talking heads are the interesting part. It's the
Mhm.
Spider-Man parts I'm less interested in.
Yeah.
It's almost like they had some ideas. The framing sequence, they had to figure out how to fit it in the book. Like, how do we do all this other stuff and move these pieces along and do these check-ins at the Bugle that are impactful and will be of interest to people? But then we also have to have Spider-Man in the book somewhere.
Hmm.
And how do we kind of, force feed that in? Is the way it ends up feeling. And yeah, I don't think it quite fits. And it's interesting because like the next issue is great. I love Chapter 4 of Spider Hunt. I love Spider Hunt in general. And so it's like this weird prelude, well, not really prelude, just the issue that happens to get wedged in between that doesn't feel like it fits anywhere. It's like a done in one that should have maybe been two.
Yeah. No, I mean I also tend to like to think of what's happening behind the scenes. Sometimes I lose that for sure. Um so I definitely agree with you there. I don't know. And again, like I just said, this isn't a book where I would read it and go, "Thank God it's over." But it is one of those things where I read it and I'm just kind of not satisfied because it feels like time wasted in a way. But it's
Mm-hmm.
still not the worst thing I've ever read because
Yeah.
can make or break a story, and despite it being kind of like recycled for a lot of Peter's main theme here, Peter Parker breaking through and always, doing what's right and breaking free from manipulation and sadness and all that is a great story, especially seeing, the memory of Aunt May helping
Mm-hmm.
him work through it, who, if not familiar with the time period, she's dead. So that is kind of like something that would indeed help him. And I mean, the recollection of all the loss and such that's happened recently too. So,
But even a couple of years ago during the Clone Saga, we got like when Ame was still alive, but on the
mhm.
precipice of death, and she comes to him and tells him like straight on, second start of the right, straight on until morning. Like we've had this happen not that many years before this, and again, so it does feel a little bit recycled to the point where like I was more excited to get back to the Bugle than I was
Mhm.
to get to the Spider-Man moments. So I'm like, oh, I just have to kind of get through this because it didn't feel like it was going anywhere. It was just page after page of him struggling. Okay, that's fine. I just didn't feel emotionally invested in the struggle because it
Mhm.
didn't feel earned. We
Yeah.
literally open the page and he's already there.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it loses a little bit. But if it had been two issues and you had a fight or something that drained him, and then he wakes up in the situation, I think it would have been better paced, and you would have felt more for the situation, and you probably would have cared a bit more. Like now, that being said, we literally just got that a few issues ago, where he gets shot at the end of one issue, and then shortly thereafter, he's then drugged in a place and he's being talked to. So it maybe would have been too similar, but I would argue it's already too similar. Like
Right.
it just again, it's not benefiting anything by coming right after the previous three issues.
Yeah, especially when the bugle stuff is what Spectacular specifically does so well.
Mm-hmm.
Every single time that the bugle is in Spectacular, it feels just feels right in a way. I like the courtroom drama feel of it all, where you have everybody on either side. So yeah, that certainly was the best part of this book. I really don't have much else to say about it. I'd give it like a 5, so it's the lowest, but it's still not the worst thing I've ever read.
Yeah, I think I would agree. It's not bad.
Yeah.
Some of the art's quite good, and some of the storytelling's not bad. It's just, did it keep me interested? And I would
Hmm.
say no. Like it left me a little bit more indifferent. Like, and I don't know if that's good or bad. Like sometimes I'd rather hate a comic because at least it invoked an emotional response to me and made me really either really fired up and happy or really fired up and angry. At least I
Yeah.
had an emotional response. I want to somehow have my emotions be firing off. This just kind of left me cold half the time.
Yeah.
So I guess indifference isn't necessarily bad, but it's not necessarily where I want to be living either.
Yeah. Also, the cover of this book is really weird. We haven't talked a lot about the covers, but it's a very strange cover.
Yeah, so that's a really interesting point. Like 251 had a cool cover with Kraven the hero. That's a little bit more dynamic. You have, people kind of cheering on Kraven, so that's kind of fun. 52, you have Spider-Man kind of grabbing his head. You have a very kind of demented, demonic version of Aloysia, and you also have Calypso kind of, cheering it on. Again, given the material, given the idea behind it, I like it. The next one with the by the command of the She-Devil Calypso kill, really did not care for this. I did not love this cover. I didn't like the portrayal of Calypso. I didn't think really worked for her either. And then we get to this one, which is just such a weird musculature for Spider-Man. The angle of his body as he's kind of falling from this, I guess, helicopter with like weird octo tentacles
Yeah.
coming out of it. Like, yeah, this was a very odd piece.
Well, and just with the text on the cover saying "This is going to hurt" too. It just, I don't know. It's a very
I
it's
don't
a
mind
very
that
strange.
actually.
Yeah.
I actually, I like silly narration on covers.
I mean, I don't mind it in like in concept. I think it's just a very strange choice
Hmm.
for the cover. It is so weird because I mean you see the arms and you're like, is this a Doc Ock book? Are we getting a Doc Ock book?
It does feel like they
Plus,
didn't
it's a
need to be
green
there.
helicopter, so like
Yeah.
could be a Doc Ock helicopter.
Yeah, it does make you wonder from a composition standpoint because you have like lightning coming out of these like Doc Ock tentacles coming out of a helicopter. It's a very odd overall, the way in which it's kind of put together and envisioned. Yeah, it's very strange. And I guess if anything, the narration does fill up some of the blank space if you think about it, because at the top at least you have the masthead, you have the corner box, and then I guess you just kind of have nothing in that bottom right hand corner. So I think just adding in some flavor text was a way of making the cover feel more full and
Mm-hmm.
not seeming empty. Not
That's a good
saying
way to
it
look at
makes
it.
it okay, but
No,
I mean,
yeah, yeah, yeah. I get what
again,
you're
why
saying.
would you add this? Like, why would you look at it and say this needs cover copy? I would imagine that might be part of the reason.
Yeah. Well, and that does it for these recaps. Sorry if they weren't as interesting as some other episodes, but they can all be hits. Um, Next episode will be the Clone Saga Spectacular for the 20th episode of the show. So there will be no recaps for those. That's just going to be me and two other guys shooting the shit about why we like the Clone Saga, and that's pretty much going to be it. After that will be our return to grace with Spider Hunt. So stay tuned for that because Spider Hunt's great. Spider Hunt is fabulous. So
Absolutely. So I have to ask, with the Clone Saga, um, if you had to kind of distill it into, kind of Act One, Act Two, Act Three, like what is your favorite part of the Clone Saga in general? I know it's a big
Um,
question, and
well,
you're gonna
so
do a
so
whole episode on
so my
this.
favorite story. So what we're going to be covering in the episode is actually just the first portion
Okay.
because I wanted to do because November 9th, we're recording on the 6th. November 9th is the 30th anniversary of Sensational Spider-Man number 0. So I wanted to do everything up to that point, kind of talking about that first period from Power and
Hmm.
Responsibility to Cyber War. So like that would be that. My favorite part of the Clone Saga is Blood Brothers. That's my favorite Spider-Man story ever. So I guess if I had to pick one specific art, it would be that. So that's kind of, I guess, the middle segment, depending on how you position it. Um, so yeah, I love Blood Brothers. That's it. Always catches people off guard because it's always like, "What's your favorite Clone Saga story?" Oh, Lost Years. What's your favorite Clone Saga story? Oh, Redemption,
Mm.
and so on and so forth. But no, Blood Brothers. I always say this: Blood Brothers encapsulates everything that I love about Ben Riley in
Mm.
that story. So everything that I think is inspiring about him and everything I think that makes him him is in Blood Brothers.
Interesting.
So
I do have a fondness for that storyline. I remember I found a copy of, I think it was the Amazing Spider, one of the Amazing Spider-Man chapters. I think it's you would know better than me. That ends with the Daily Grind on fire. Is that in
yeah, so
Amazing?
that is 411.
411. Okay. So I remember getting a copy of that, no cover. I just found it at like school. I don't know if someone like tossed it and it had no cover left. And I remember just poring over those pages, and just falling in love with the art and just really like, again, I didn't buy those issues at the time. I was reading a friend's copies, but yeah, no, that's a good one. You're right that people sleep on that because I think they zero in on very particular eras of the Clone Saga, which is why I asked that question. Obviously, you are a Ben head, as Zeb Wells would call you, in the best way. But yeah, no, I'm excited to listen to your next episode, hear you guys talk about it, because I no, the people you're going to talk to about it. How old is everyone? Because this does matter to me.
So I have Zach Joyner, who is the Spider Dude Radio Network guy. So he had Clone Saga Chronicles. That was his show. He is I don't know how old he is exactly, but he is older than 30 years old. And then my co-host will be on that one, my normal co-host Matthew. So he's 30 or 31 at this point. Matthew, I know his dad collected Spider-Man for years. So he got a lot of the Clone Saga stuff as it was at the tail end and
Mm-hmm.
also read it all going backwards. And then Zach, I know, I believe he was old enough to be buying it as it was coming out, from what I can remember. So they're definitely of the time, um, more so than I am. So
Interesting. Well,
it'll be a really fun discussion, especially with Zach having his show. I mean, he started CSC in 2009, so he was super early in on the talking about the Clone Saga after it being the damned period.
mhm.
So it'll be a really fun discussion. I'm both excited and terrified because I have no idea how long it's going to be.
I'm in. It's interesting. I'm always waiting for, and I guess we're kind of seeing this with Danny Kazem, who's the editor that works with JMD a lot right now. I'm waiting to see that wave of people who like, loved the Clone Saga when it was coming out because they were young, and now they're actually in charge of the comics.
Hmm.
And like Zeb Wells was not that. He was like the
Yeah,
generation before still, who didn't really get that. So I'm still waiting for the generation that loved the Clone Saga to really be in charge with it and like quote unquote fix Ben,
yeah,
at least bring him back. I always like to think like the Ben I loved, he did die in Spider-Man 75, and
yeah,
every attempt at bringing him back just isn't that character, and that's okay because nothing will take away the Ben I love. The Ben I love still
Yeah.
exists in a very specific period of
I
time.
am so glad you are a normal human being that thinks that. I'm in such a weird corner of the internet and fandom where people are just so angry about everything all the time.
Hmm.
And I think that's just kind of the internet in general, and especially on like Twitter. But I know some people that are like, Ben Riley is ruined forever, and like all this stuff, and I'm like, you have 4 omnibuses worth of material with the Ben Riley you care about, plus a mini series, plus I
Hmm.
would argue beyond. So like you have that character as you want him, as you like him. Just because he's been really crappy the past 8 years, 9 years,
Hmm.
doesn't mean that he's ruined. Granted, he's been ruined longer than he was relevant, but not as much material has come out with him over those nine
No.
years than the 90s. So, yeah, hearing somebody say that isn't me is very nice. Because
Well, you're welcome.
I'm always playing positive when it comes to Ben, at least.
At least they're trying to do something with the character. I'll give them credit for that. Do I always love some of the chasm stuff? No. But at least they're trying to find a way to use the character in a way that's not just another version of Peter. Which is interesting as well because, Peter used to be the only spider person, and now there's a million of them. That's just in the 616 alone. Like, there's just an entire spider posse. So, how do you differentiate the character and make him different? It is challenging. I wouldn't want to be a writer trying to figure that out because there's limited space. Like they tried that with Scarlet Spider. Well, sorry, not Scarlet Spider. They tried it with Kane when he was living in Houston, trying to do their own thing. Okay, that's an interesting subversion on who that character was, trying to do a different thing. I can get behind that. He's in a whole different locale. Sure. So as much as I would love that if it felt more like the Ben I remember, I understand that they do have to do new things and try new things, and hopefully eventually I'll be more interested in it, or at least it'll feel more like the character I want to love. But again, he's been resurrected and killed so many times that like it's easier to just be like, well, he's a version of Ben that's not the same anymore, and that's okay.
He's the
He's just
30th version of Ben. So
Yeah, he's not the Ben we love, and that's all right. The Ben we love died in 1996. We can enjoy that Ben stories. Those stories will still be there. As you said, there's 4 omnibuses, or there's multiple complete collections, or epics, or whatever you want. You can experience stories with that version of the character, and they're going to be just as good as you remember them. If you like them. If you didn't like them, they'll be just as bad as you remember.
yeah, exactly. Oh man, just as good. Remember, guys, the Clone Saga is not bad, except for maybe some of it. Definitely some of it. Yeah, we'll talk about that next time. Um, well, thank you again, Adam, for being here. I feel like I wasn't a wonderful host because of how tired I am, but I always appreciate your discussion and how invested you are. So thank you again, and it's been an absolute pleasure to have you. And I can't wait to be on your show. I said it last time, but I can't wait to be on yours too.
At some point, we're definitely going to make that happen. Hopefully, with my co-host, because I know they have questions for you because they
Okay.
love your collection and they're really interested. And again, they were just as blown away as I was by the fact that you are younger than the Clone Saga and yet are a massive Clone Saga fan. So we're very interested to peel that onion.
Yes. Dissect me. We'll do it. It'll be great. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Be sure to check out Adam's show, Comic Shenanigans, of course, on everywhere, I believe, every podcast platform, at least that I've looked at. So yeah, give it a listen if you haven't already. I've definitely been catching up since our last chat. So I hope everybody has a great night, day, whatever time it is, and we'll catch you next time.